Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, friends, it is time for Tiger Claw Radio. Oh yeah, I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a bit now. Yeah, alright, so this week we are finishing off the top 40 tracks. Oh, there we go, golden cookie. Top 40 tracks of the 8-Bit Collective. Top 40 of 8,000. And by the way, I'm running Cookie Clicker in the background while I'm recording this week's episode. I'm trying to pass a threshold of 450 buildings of each type. So I have it minimized. I'm listening for that sound. It doesn't come through on the podcast, but it makes a little rubber ducky sound whenever one of those golden cookies pops up. So we'll deal with that as it comes. But in the meantime, let's talk about this best of the 8-Bit Collective project. 40 tracks spread across one track per week. Would be almost a year if we managed to get one done every week. But this has been going for a year plus. This is a long-running TCR project that is coming to a head right here on this episode. And man, there's been some build-up. So let's take a look at what we actually have on the docket. Here we go. Malman and Jewel, okay, and is that the contributing artist? Oh, I got it. So they have everything tucked into the title. So Malman and Jewel is the artist, and Tomorrow Without You is the name of the song. I'm not familiar with these names, and this is coming from a pool that has a lot of big names when it comes to chiptunes. All right, so here it is, the number one track on the 8-Bit Collective. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. More when we come back. So there you have it, boys and girls. It's the end of an era here on TCR. You know, as an individual track, I gotta say, it really lives up to the number one spot. It's happy, you know, it has that positive vibe like all of Hemrock's picks tend to, but it's danceable, and it's you know, longer than a lot of the other tracks on in the upper half of that list. So it's got some staying power, but it manages to not feel like it's getting old in that time. A really good pick. Big thanks to Hemrock, man, for putting this together. I gotta say, Hemrock, we have to work together to get you running a chiptune podcast. I know it's too much to ask to get you to run a podcast on your own. We need to get this project up and running. I'll produce it for you. I'll do the heavy lifting, but I need your help, bro. I think everybody agrees that that you're the one with your ear to the ground when it comes to chiptunes. Oh, hang on. There's another golden cookie. All right, so moving forward with the video game discussion, this is a bit I recorded about the Evercade this past week, and more stuff has happened since then, but let's go ahead and get this started. Well, boys and girls, I have taken the plunge, which I didn't think I was ever going to do. I talked a little bit last week about the Evercade. I finally took the plunge, and I ordered an Evercade. Specifically, the handhelds that I talked about, there were two of them. They're licensed handhelds with preloaded games that also happen to have an Evercade slot. Capcom has one, and Taito has one. I ordered the Taito handheld, so it's got a small list of games that are going to come preloaded. And it's, to me, the preloaded is going to basically be Space Invaders and Puzzle Bobble, and then a bunch of other games I probably won't play. But I ordered that, and then I ordered two cartridges, pre-ordered rather, because it comes out in November, so I won't actually see this thing until then. But I also ordered the Duke Nukem cartridge that you can purchase, because there were two of them, but only one of them is actually available right now. That's the one that has Duke Nukem 1 and 2 remastered, and Duke Nukem 3D Total Meltdown. That one apparently had a little controversy surrounding it. I didn't know about this, but I found it when I actually looked it up. When it was first hitting the shelves, or first being produced, the artwork for Duke Nukem 1 and 2 remastered was actually AI generated. Shock, awe. You think about Duke Nukem causing controversy, and that's not the kind of controversy I was expecting, but Duke Nukem 1 and 2 were MS-DOS games. They were old, and they did have, at least Duke Nukem 2 did have its own artwork. Duke Nukem 2, I remember seeing in box. I had it in the big box form at one point. But they had some artwork that looked, I never would have, I wouldn't have known it was AI generated. And they got some backlash, so they changed it, and there you go. So the Duke Nukem 1 and 2, and Duke Nukem 3D Total Meltdown, which is interesting because Total Meltdown was specifically the PS1 version, and I've read some speculation that it had to do with rights issues, like they didn't have the rights for the regular Duke Nukem 3D music, which is why they went for Total Meltdown. But I don't know that for sure. That's just a rumor. But anyway, I ordered that cartridge. Specifically, the first Duke Nukem, I love that game. I played that game many times, and being a DOS game, it has a really large heads-up display. And I'm looking at the screenshots for the remaster, and the remaster looks really good. So, this is actually a game that I really like, and this version, as far as I know, is only available on the Evercade. Duke Nukem in general, they disappeared. All the Duke Nukem games prior to Gearbox all were removed from Steam. Like Duke Nukem 1 and 2 had only been on Steam for like a year or two, and then they're gone. Manhattan Project, gone. Old versions of 3D, gone. So this is neat to see another legacy Duke Nukem release. I was especially interested in the other cartridge, because remember, there were two Duke Nukem cartridges, I said. But the other one, for whatever reason, is not available on Amazon. I don't know if it's sold out already or if they just removed it from the market. But it had the PlayStation games that were It had, okay, Land of the Babes, and what was the other one? A Time to Kill. Had both of those. And I remember playing, hang on. I remember playing Land of the Babes. Was it Land of the Babes? One of those two. One of like the third-person chase camera shooters on the PlayStation, like multiplayer, with my friends, and really liking it, and then revisiting it as an adult and thinking the frame rate was just not up to par. So if they're able to remaster those even a tiny bit and put them on a cartridge, man, oh man, I am in. But here again, I looked the cartridge up. There's a listing for it on Amazon, but it's unavailable. It's not even like it has a price tag and it's sold out. It just says unavailable. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. So the Duke Nukem cartridge was one, and what was the other one that I ordered? Actually, look back at my history here. Hang on a second. Because I've already forgotten, because my brain doesn't work. Yes, that's right. It was the home computer one. Home Computer Heroes Collection 1, which is a bunch of games for really old computers that were made recently. You know, I'm looking at the system list: Amiga, C64, MSX2, but none of these are super old. Farming Simulator for Commodore 64 is like 2017, I think. I bought it specifically for Planet X2 for the Commodore 64, which is a real-time strategy game that came out in 2017. There is a listing for this game on Steam for $10 that has had my attention, and I strongly considered buying. So since it had that one game, I figured I would just play it on the Evercade, and then I would also play Attack of the Petsky Robots action game for the Amiga, 2021. Good looking games. So I'm really stoked about that. And those are the two cartridges that I have pre-ordered. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how this Evercade thing goes. My big thing about the Evercade, the standard system, plugging it in, putting in the cartridge, and sitting down with two people. There's some pretty good games that accommodate that. But nobody in my household plays games that way. I couldn't plug in the system and sit down with somebody and play a game, because the little one would get in the middle of it like the Tasmanian Devil, and the older ones would wish it was something more, more recent and super and cool, and yeah, so that's kind of a thing. But it's a bit of a drag, because some of these games, like I said, multiplayer are cool. One of the cartridges, not the ones I bought, but one of them has Super Homebrew War, which turns out to be like a port of Super Mario War, but with all the licensing stuff removed, which is a really great game. 4-player local multiplayer, and it's like a brawler game, but you're trying to jump on top of the other person like little Goombas and stuff. That's a really fun game. I've got Super Mario War on one of my Ambernick devices, and it gets played quite a lot. So yeah, that would be a great cartridge to play. But again, no, what good is it if it's just single player? So I'm gonna stick with this little tiny handheld, and we'll get these couple of cartridges, and we'll see how this goes. Because now that I have it ordered and it's coming in the mail, I'm looking at that, like the set-top box pack that comes with 2 cartridges. And I'm thinking, that now all of a sudden it looks like a good deal. So I've taken my first steps into becoming an Evercade guy. So there you go. So I guess not much has changed since I recorded that. I have acquired a couple of additional games. Specifically, hang on a second. If you haven't been keeping up with the Alcove videos, I got the Worms collection, and I have the Renovation collection. And the Duke Nukem games I mentioned they're not going to be here until November. And then I also ordered the Home Computer here. I can't remember what it's called. Home Computer something collection. That's the one that has like Amiga games and Commodore 64 games that have been made in the last 10 years. So that's a good, solid collection of games. I mean, those 5 cartridges together, all for a tiny little handheld. So I'm seriously eyeing the home console model, the Versus model. So we'll see. This thing will show up, and we'll go from there. I've been such a non-news guy for so long. I don't even know how to introduce this, but I cruised the retro gaming news sites to see what was going on. I found a couple of interesting things. One thing that was at the top of the headlines for a little while was that somebody dug into the assembly code behind Super Mario Brothers 3, and they found that the roulette game, the you know, where the like the mushrooms and stuff will spin, and you try and match them up, that they're saying that's rigged. So I took a look at it, and the video is 20 minutes long, and to be perfectly honest, it's kind of dry because they get into the assembly code. But what they found out was the card matching game and the spinning roulette game are both they're both governed by a random number generator, and with the card matching game, it generates 8 possible solutions. Which, you know, if you had Nintendo Power back in the day, they were just listed, and it's an easy peasy game. And the other one is like a billion solutions or something, and it runs it every time you hit the button. So it's essentially fixed. And there's certain people out there, including myself, which was like, how I felt like if you hit the button at the right time, then it actually will come up with a match. But it appeared to be, based on this, it appears like it's been fixed all along. And what are you going to do? Okay. I mean, I guess that's news because it's always nice to hear people, you know, hey, we've examined the code and we learned something. But still a great game, even though that card matching thing, or the roulette thing is essentially fixed. Yeah. What are you going to do? I still thought it was neat. I still liked getting those little, you know, spade houses or whatever they were when I played the game back in the day. But I didn't get a lot of extra lives off of them, that's for sure. And I guess this would be why. There was another one that is making headlines. The Analog Company that's making the high-end systems, they're making a Nintendo 64 system, which is pretty cool. I guess, I mean, as far as Analog is concerned, the Analog Pocket really took me out of that company because I thought that thing kind of looked like junk. High-end Game Boy with a super unstable cartridge slot that costs a ton of money. And apparently it didn't sell very well, so they, after the fact, added the ability to play ROMs when initially it couldn't. That kind of soured me on that company a little bit. However, I will say that when we did Tigerfest last year, Sendu brought along their Genesis, and their Genesis was really slick that he had. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like the high-end Genesis model. He used whenever Sendu would talk about it, he would use the title, which was like a 3-letter abbreviation, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. But anyway, they are making a Nintendo 64. And it says it's coming in 2024. I'm looking to see if there's a price because I know it's going to be bananas. But they're saying, yeah, they're saying it's going to be really high end, which I guess is cool because it's tough to scale up some of those old, early 3D games, and especially, you talk about like retro handhelds and stuff. This is a harder system to emulate, so they're making a system that is not an emulation system, but rather actual hardware. Kind of neat. Great system to do it for. And there you go. That's the thing. It exists on planet Earth. And we come to our final news story. Earlier we talked about code analysis on Super Mario Brothers 3. Well, according to TimeExtension.com, there are new characters that were discovered after all these years in NBA Jam Tournament Edition, specifically the Sega Saturn edition. So I'm looking at it now, and there are 2 characters, Kitzrow, Kitzrow, and Fox. I don't know who these 2 guys are. I have to think they're from the development team or something. And apparently, let's see, and this is from the article. According to Sega Saturn, Shiro Malenko apparently discovered the characters while digging through the game's hex code. They are believed to be exclusive to the Sega Saturn version and are unlocked on the name entry screen by holding L and R and entering the following. Kit, Tim Kitzrow, Kit, June 8th, Fox, August 3rd. Neat. Keen bean. It looks like all the stats are question marks, which is bizarre, but that's cool. NBA Jam was a game that, like, at least in the arcade, had a lot of really weird hidden stuff. So if this were to happen and be real, NBA Jam would be one of the games I could see this happening, especially like an obscure version. This is the Sega Saturn version. If you have a Sega Saturn now, chances are you're not using it to play NBA Jam Tournament Edition. I don't know. I guess I could be wrong about that one. Well, boys and girls, we're about the 21-minute mark. This is a part of the show where I like to thank the sponsors. It's a Patreon-sponsored program, so to the individuals who give of their resources... a golden cookie. Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Anyway, to those who give of their resources to keep us on the air, it's an old tradition here on TCR. I read their names off in a hall of distinguished gentlemen, and they are Hemrock, Tecmo Balls, EmeraldRangers.com, and Arabka. Thank you guys so much. I hope you're enjoying the party. It's time for On the Desk. That's right. Not a review, nothing like that. Just what's on the desk. Gets me talking about games that are outside what I would normally talk about. And, the goal is to come up with something that maybe you wouldn't find on Wikipedia. All right. So I got 2 games on the desk right now. Last week I had this gigantic stack that I ended up moving off to the table on the side. Doesn't count. Not on the desk. I have 2 games. One I'm going to spend virtually no time on. Sankyo Fever for the Super Famicom. It is a Japanese Super Nintendo game, a Super Famicom game, particularly a pachinko game that I ordered, showed up in the mail yesterday. Haven't played it yet. I'll put that aside. But the one that I'm really excited about is I got Fighter Maker, Age-Tech's Fighter Maker for the PS1. I had this complete in box for the longest time, and I wasn't able to find it in my collection. I'm convinced that I must have sold it when I was paring down, but I had it for forever, and I was able to get, buying Japanese PS1 games, I came across the Japanese version, which I have, and it's too much text, I think, to play the Japanese version, and know how to get around. So I've put it in a couple of times, thinking, man, I want to get the English version again. I had it, back when it was new. It was the one game that I got on the internet and got a save file for using the Dex drive. Do you guys remember the Dex drive? Hook your PS1 cards up to the computer using a serial cable. That's how old it was. And I got one character, and it was an animation that, made a lewd gesture, and I was like, oh dear, and I put it aside and never touched the Dex drive again. So I found a disc-only copy, and I'm looking forward to playing it and taking a couple of screenshots of the English menus and using them to navigate the Japanese one, which is ridiculous. But that also came in the mail yesterday, and I wish I'd filmed it because they did the most ridiculous packing job ever. It was a bag in a bag in a bag, and I've bought disc-only games, and if you're not going to put it in a case, then you can make it survive the mail just by putting it between 2 pieces of cardboard and taping it together. They decided not to do that. I don't know, but whatever. It's in really good shape, and the thing about Fighter Maker is that it's not like RPG Maker in that you're making a game. It's more that here is a pre-existing fighting game, and you can mess with the animations and make new moves. And the pre-existing fighting game, if you don't mess with it, despite being devoid of music in the matches and whatnot, is actually a halfway decent game. It's pretty good 3D fighter for the PS1, which is the reason why I think the Japanese game, even if you can't read it, it's still worth owning, because if you you can still play the fighting game without, you can't, it makes it prohibitively difficult to make changes, but at least you can get in there and kick, punch. It's all in the mind, etc., etc. So that's what's on the desk: Pachinko and Fighter Maker, and I couldn't be more excited. All right, let's take a look and see what's going on the Failbag channel over on the Discord. Oh, hang on, there's a golden cookie. Man, a lot of bad golden cookies today. Anyway, shifting gears back to the Discord. Let's see, we talked about NBA Jam. We talked about, oh, by the way, one of the characters in NBA Jam, that they discovered was the guy who does the voiceover. He's on fire, that guy. And the actual guy on Twitter was like, Tim Kitzrow, that's his name, on Twitter was like, I had no idea. Which is great. Anyway, Hemrock writes, how's FF6 going? What rages have you gotten for Gao? My daughter and I started playing the game together, and we just got Gao. Here's some recommended rages. Stray Cat, get it, you'll thank me later. Templar, cast Fyra. Bomb, cast Blaze. Chip Rabbit, cast Raise on Ally. Did you suplex the Phantom Train with Sabin? I love that. And he shows a GIF file of the Phantom Train battle being picked up and suplexed. Okay, so a couple things. Gao can only get rages in that one specific area, and I was stuck in that area for a while. So I got a bunch, but I couldn't list them for you because the only one I ever really use in combat right now is the soldier one, which ends up casting fire. And it's really basic, but it functions, so that's what I've been sticking to. As far as the Phantom Train is concerned, and I did mention this in chat, but I used the Phantom Train. Oh, hang on, Golden Cookie. Golden Cookie, come on, bear with me. And clickety-click, ruin. Lost 2.3 sextillion cookies. Thanks a lot. All right, so the Phantom Train in FF6, there is a quirk with the Phantom Train where if you use a Phoenix Down on it, which typically raises a dead ally, it will kill the Phantom Train immediately. Because Phantom Train, right? This is a train of the dead, and you raise the dead, and thus it dies. And it seemed like a cheap move, but one thing I hate about FF6, and a lot of the FF games are like this, for boss battles, you do not acquire any experience. So I honestly felt okay cheesing it, if that's the route they took in design. So I got it in one walkthrough. And this is me later on that day. I'm about 6 hours in, just got unstuck after being stuck for quite a while. Couldn't figure out how to proceed with the girls scenario. That's the part about 4 hours into the game where your group, which is made up of a lot of characters, splits into 3 different parties, and you have to do each leg, in whatever order you choose. It almost put me off the game, making progress again now, though. Okay, so having said that, when I play Final Fantasy VI, I've gotten stuck a number of times. And usually one of the things that puts me off of, one of these JRPG type games is I ultimately find myself wandering around, not sure where to go next, just dealing with the random encounters. That has happened a bunch of times in Final Fantasy VI. I'm starting to think that game's direction, like the way it tells the player where to go, is not that good. Another place I got stuck was in that same scenario, the girls scenario. She goes back to the starting town, and you're supposed to remember the secret area. Oop, Phantom Cookie or Golden Cookie, hang on one second. You're supposed to remember another bad one, where like a secret area is that you took to escape it earlier in the game. But when I got there, I could not remember where that is. So I was stuck until I looked it up on a walkthrough, and I was like, oh, that's right. I never would have found that on my own. So that means if I was playing this back pre-internet, that would have been the end of Final Fantasy VI for me. And then the years would have gone by, and that's how I would have remembered it. Hey, I played that game, but I got stuck about 6 hours in, or what have you, and that was the end of it. And, that I remember a good amount of Final Fantasy games being that way. But back on track now, making progress. Again, about 6.5 hours in. And yeah, we'll see how it goes next week. So let's talk a little bit about the alcove. Whoop, feels like it's a little loud. Is that better? Let's talk a little bit about the alcove. Did a few videos, in front of my little TV, just hanging out. And so I spent, I think the most commonly played game for me, like outside of the PC, was Spartan X, which I played on my, Hyperkin Famicom clone, the NES clone, using a little Famicom adapter. The Kung Fu for the NES, but the nearly identical Japanese release. I don't know why I kind of locked on this game, but I've played it. I managed to play it all the way through a couple of times, and I noticed something that in the third floor boss, there's like a half-sized man, a short man who throws fireballs, and if you punch him standing up, his head flies off and he disappears into smoke. I've got to play the American version because I have a sneaking suspicion that didn't fly in the States. And if that's the case, that's something really awesome. So, Spartan X or Kung Fu for the NES. Simple game, dumb game, but I don't know what it is. I've very much enjoyed it. That along with Super Mario Brothers 3 Mix, the Super Mario Brothers 3 ROM hack that remixes a lot of old recognizable levels from past Mario games. I sat down with that for like an hour and a half. The only problem is that is very much like a save and load kind of game, but there's no battery in the cartridge because I didn't order it that way. Oop, hang on. So I played all the way through the first world, and the first world is their highlight reel of the very first game, Super Mario Brothers. And I started playing through the second world, got about halfway through it, and the second world is their highlight reel of Super Mario Brothers 2, which is fascinating because it's all done in the Mario Brothers 3 engine, but you can still pick up and throw enemies more or less the same way you could in Mario Brothers 2. It's a great game. If you're an owner of one of those emulation devices, I would recommend giving it a try. I have it on all my devices because it's listed in my Essential ROMs folder, and that's definitely how I'm going to be playing it, is on an emulation device so that I can save and load, because my actual console version didn't do that. But that was a good time. I had a really positive experience playing that game. So yeah, good times. Let's shift gears now and go to the fail bag. We're going to start by heading over to EmeraldRangers.com, which is the site that made the deal to bring Tiger Claw Radio back on the air after hiatus. So, in the past couple weeks, they've had top 10 Sonic games that aren't elitist, Super Mario Wonder Review, a wacky new take on a classic formula. Any interest in the new Super Mario game? I don't know. I feel like I'm over it, but yeah, that's a thing. Sonic Superstars Review, reimagined 2D Sonic at an expensive price. And we have Bad As Release, the great new, the green, excuse me, let's try that again. Bad As Release, the great new album, Fight the Demons. That is a music release. And then last week, or 2 weeks ago here on TCR, was the Weird Twisted Metal show. So nobody left comments on EmeraldRangers.com, but just bear in mind that's where the new episodes are. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, there's already a new episode over on EmeraldRangers.com. That said, let's jump over to the Discord. And we talked a little bit, we read some of the stuff from Hemrock about Final Fantasy VI. Durabka says, okay, well, hold on. CF and Hemrock, since I got a job again and I'll have more money, I've been thinking about getting a clone console to play the old cartridge games. I've been thinking about a Retron 3 or 5, since Retro Freak is a bit pricey, but I'm not sure about the Retrons. I'm not sure the Retrons come with a European AC adapter. I saw an adaptable multi-area AC on the Hyperkin store, but it was sold out. Years ago, I tried using my old R3 with an AC adapter, and it fried because I thought it would convert the voltage. Anyway, what system would you recommend? Also thinking of getting a Raspberry Pi emulation machine for my TV. And I said this in text, but again, Raspberry Pis are awesome. But here's the problem with Raspberry Pi. Every iteration of the Raspberry Pi got bigger and better, and unfortunately more expensive. So the latest edition of the Raspberry Pi, Raspberry Pi 4, is a slick little box. But you couple that with some of the supply chain issues they've been having, the thing's over $100. What's the point? You know? there are clone Raspberry Pi devices that I think are closer to like a Raspberry Pi 2 or a Raspberry Pi 3 that are much cheaper, and I've actually considered getting one of those, but I just haven't because there's other things. I've been playing, I've been interested in the Evercade lately, although the machine hasn't shown up. I've been playing my C64 Mini off and on, and I've even today I was considering getting the Amiga Mini, the Amiga A500 Mini, because it's down to a little, it was like 150 and now it's down to like 115, and I realize that's a lot for a mini console, but one that openly supports sideloading the same way the C64 has. I'm considering it. My C64 Mini opened the door of Commodore 64 to me. Like, I'm downloading new games and playing them and trying them because of this machine. So if the Amiga Mini would do that, then I think it might actually be worth the high ticket price. So we'll see. I'm definitely going to get the Panzer figured out first, the new PC, and my Evercade is definitely going to show up first, but that's something that's on the near horizon. I had been weighing the differences between the C64 Maxi, like the full-size C64 clone, and the Amiga clone, and I'm kind of leaning towards the Amiga clone just because I want to expand what I can actually play. But back to the channel. See, Hemrock says, I'd recommend the Retron 5. I actually had a Retro Freak for a short time, but I ultimately sold it and bought a Retron 5. I actually prefer the Retron. You may also want to take a look at the Retro Bit Super Retro Trio HD Plus or the Hyperkin Retron 3 HD 3-in-1 retro gaming console. that is a mouthful. So from what I understand, because Hemrock talks about this quite a bit, the Retron 5, correct me if I'm wrong, that has the ability to apply patches to actual cartridges, right? So like Super Mario 3 Mix, like I talked about earlier, you could head over to romhacking.net, pick up a copy of the patch, and play it on your Retron 5 on your actual cartridge, which I think is a really awesome thing. It's pretty incredible, actually. So the Retron 5 appeals to me in that respect. I think, based on what I'm hearing and of your situation, provided one that fits the voltage situation, Retron 5 is the way to go, man. You are not, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not a guy who wants to have 20 systems. So if you're just going to get the one and try and get the most mileage out of it as possible, go with Retron 5. It's got the most cartridge slots. More cartridge slots equals more power. And now you're playing with power. Then they have a back and forth. I'm not going to read every message, but we move further on down the line. Emrock says, I'm proud of the fact I still have Steam running on my Windows XP PC, albeit in offline mode. And he has a screenshot of Windows XP. It's running Steam. Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers. By the way, Steam will stop running on Windows XP in 8 days. And how long has it said that? And I can see some of the other games that you have installed. Europa Universalis 3, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, Dungeons of Dreadmore, Deadly Sin, The East New World, Gunmetal Arcania 0, Muri, which is a fun game. That is a very niche game. I like Muri a lot. Very cool, man. Those are good Windows XP picks. Magic the Gathering 2012 is still fun. We got a screenshot there. That's really cool stuff, man. By the way, I was recently on a work trip and stopped at a game store. I found Spider Fighter and Dark Cavern for a grand total of $8. Not too shabby. I'm happy they both work. Took a little tender love and care to get Spider Fighter going. Posted a high score in the forums. I don't think I have Spider Fighter. I'll have to double check that. But anything to get some Atari high score battling for sure. Let me know how Dark Cavern goes, because that's an old favorite of mine. That's one I actually bought twice. Very sweet. And then we scroll down a little bit, and he has a video, new Powkiddy V90 firmware, which I looked at and is really awesome. The Miu custom firmware for the V90 is getting a big update. There's not much to look at, but I'm thinking it might be about time to make that jump. The firmware that I have on my V90 is still the one that you loaded before you sent it to me, and it works very well. The only problems are that like certain Super Nintendo games drop frames here and there, and that leads me to not ever play Super Nintendo on it, which sucks because there's some games that like would fit perfectly on it. You know what I mean? But you know, it is what it is. And also, TIC 80 games they're playable, but certain TIC 80 games will experience like a massive slowdown. So it might be worth it so that I could play TIC 80 and Super Nintendo. But other than that, very cool, man. And that said, let's jump over to YouTube and see what people were saying about last week's episode. Well, there's a few random comments here or there, but it occurs to me I haven't posted a podcast on YouTube in a couple of weeks, so not really anything new. That said, you know what time it is. Thanks for listening to Tiger Claw Radio, everybody. There will be a new show this Friday. Whatever it is you're dealing with in your life, I hope it goes well for you, man. I'm rooting for you. I really am. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you Friday.